striking, isn't it, that we have the highest rates of incarceration in this country, people who are incarcerated for minor, non-violent marijuana violations, and yet you have individuals on Wall Street responsible for the loss, the pensions lost, homes lost, lives and savings destroyed, and yet not only have they not been held accountable under our laws, but the banks that they worked in, they got the bailout, the taxpayer bailout, while those who suffered the consequences got no bailout. And the banks that they worked for are even bigger today than they were in 2008 when they were supposedly too big to fail. So this leads us to the point to say, well, how are any of us to believe that even with the passage of legislation like Dodd-Frank and other bills, these banks are more powerful and bigger today, placing us as people in this country once again at even greater risk, not if there's another crash, but when. The number one thing that the banks are afraid of is the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall, which says this has got to be our number one priority to protect consumers, to protect our dollars from those who are gambling with those savings, with our pensions, that was a major contributor that caused this financial crash on Wall Street. And we need to hold those responsible accountable. That's it. They're not too big to fail. At a certain point, there will have to be a course correction, and it will come with some hardship. It will require resilience from all of us to make it through that and not just say, well, how can we bail out these corporations and these big banks once again, because that renders us unable to deal with the problems of why their failures occurred in the first place. It was the small banks, the community banks, the banks that were doing the right thing that have suffered as the consequence of the bad actors. Those bad actors should have been allowed to fail so that we could be stronger as a country, both individually and through our economy. That's the approach that I would take, that I think really needs to be taken. It's something I've worked on a lot in Congress. I've introduced legislation to do this, and we continue to push this issue forward as president. I'm going to draw it back to the pay-to-play culture in Washington. These banks have a lot of influence over Democrats and Republicans in Congress, which is why even as some legislation's been passed, saying, hey, look, we did something about what happened on Wall Street. Well, that something clearly wasn't what needed to be done if we're in a worse off situation now than we were in 2008. So that foundational change, I believe that no members of Congress should be able to take money from PACs or lobbyists. Take away that source of the payment so that there's no doubt in any one of your minds about who's actually helping to write those policies, that there's no, hey, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. There's a lot of arrogance in Washington where people believe that they can do what they want because they've gotten away with it for so long. We've got to make sure that doesn't continue.